All right. First of all, just a little bit about myself. I'm a tech entrepreneur by background who's ended up working in the legal space now. I left working at Capital Group, where I was working on their blockchain and crypto research and experimentation, to get into DAOs full-time as a technologist. So let's go to the origin story slide. So how did I go from doing tech research to running a company called MIDAO that does legal services for DAOs? And we'll get more into that in a second. So I was working for a DAO about 3 years ago that was offered $1 million grant from the Moonbeam Ecosystem Fund. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. And Moonbeam said, well, to accept this grant, your DAO needs a legal entity so that you can sign the grant agreement. So we started looking around the world. We looked at Delaware, Cayman Islands, Switzerland, et cetera, and came to the realization that every legal entity in the world had certain requirements that we felt were incompatible for our DAO, either today or in the future. So in particular, the requirement to know the names and physical addresses of all of our members, right? We wanted to be able to have anonymous members, and the requirement to have some kind of board, officers, directors, trustees, management team. Right? We did not want to have a management team in our DAO. We wanted it to be what we felt was truly decentralized. So this caused us to reach out to a senator in the sovereign nation of the Marshall Islands in the South Pacific, which has been a leader in the shipping industry. It's a leading jurisdiction in the shipping industry for many years. There are about 50 publicly traded companies on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ that are Marshall Islands companies. They're all in the shipping industry. So we reached out to the senator and we said, hey, in some ways, DAOs are kind of like ships. They don't live in any one place. They're kind of everywhere and nowhere at the same time. How would you like to expand your country's expertise from shipping into Web3? And so this led to, over the past 3 years, we've written and passed 3 laws in the Marshall Islands that have created a nonprofit and for-profit DAO LLC, a legal entity made for DAOs. It overcomes those 2 key deficiencies, again, that we saw in legal entities everywhere else in the world, and several others. We started a company called MIDAO, which stands for Marshall Islands DAO. It's a partnership with the government of the Marshall Islands, and it's the sole registered agent that can create and maintain these legal entities for people who want them. Since then, we've signed up over 150 DAOs, creating or that already have DAO LLCs in the Marshall Islands. And now we're turning this year to trying to promote what we're doing to the rest of the world, to lawyers in particular, so that they can figure out when a DAO LLC may be a good fit for their clients. So next slide, please. From our perspective, first of all, what a DAO is actually a little bit different from the DAOs that may be a perfect fit for a DUNA. Like Miles said, you kind of have an on-chain asset that you're trying to govern. We look at DAOs as organizations, first and foremost, that do things a little bit differently from traditional organizations. So next slide, please. And so these are organizations that do these 4 things: membership tracking, governance and voting, treasury management, and often controlling software, which could be that protocol. They do these things on the blockchain using tokens and voting in particular, rather than doing them on paper through documents, emails, meetings, et cetera. Next slide, please. So what makes this so exciting is that now you can start an organization. Again, whether it's a Web3 organization or not, you can start an organization as easily as you can launch a website, and you can scale an organization at the speed of the cloud. Right? We look at Constitution DAO, which is a famous story from a couple of years ago. Actually, the founders in the room. Constitution DAO was able to create an organization, raise almost $50 million, and take actions collectively in 1 week. Right? There would have been no way to do that with traditional document-based organizations, and that was a couple of years ago. Next slide, please. So, of course, there are many unique legal issues for DAOs, and I'm not going to talk about all of them, and my company doesn't address all of them, but let's just talk about the legal entity issue for a minute. Next slide, please. Miles mentioned there are these key issues that are probably obvious to most lawyers or people in this world, that an unincorporated group of people engaged in a common enterprise, you run into certain issues like you can't sign contracts like grant agreements, you can't pay taxes, you have just basic pass-through taxes, there's unlimited liability, et cetera. So let's go 2 slides forward, please. And again, I don't have to tell this room very much about why legal entities are important. Let's go to the next slide. What's interesting is there are so many different legal entity types that you can choose from, right? And so for any DAO, you're kind of looking around the world and you really need legal help, but you're trying to figure out what's the right entity for your scenario, and it really is different in each situation. Next slide, please. Also, of course, you have jurisdictions all over the world. And so, Cayman and BVI and Switzerland, having been so popular in crypto for so long, remain popular amongst DAOs, even though there are meaningful limitations. Of course, you have DAO-specific laws now in Wyoming, including the DUNA, but also the DAO LLC, and then in the Marshall Islands. And I'm not aware of any other country anywhere outside of a U.S. state or the Marshall Islands that has passed DAO-specific legislation, although many of them talk about doing so, and hopefully will do so. Next slide, please. So just a couple examples of how people are using the Marshall Islands DAO LLC. So first of all, in most cases, when there is a protocol involved, similar to what Miles was talking about, the DAO LLC is not wrapping the whole protocol. Right? If there is all kinds of on-chain activity happening, you're not saying that people are interacting with the legal entity when they put liquidity into a pool or stake a token in most cases, or do some kind of other on-chain activity, but you're really wrapping the organizational structure, right? The treasury of the DAO, the governance decisions, right? The members that are acting in concert to pull the whole thing off. And so you have members interacting with the DAO LLC. You also have members interacting often with the protocol, and you also have the DAO interacting with the protocol, perhaps governing a couple of key characteristics. Next slide, please. We do also really commonly see people combining a devco or opco, which Miles also mentioned, with the DAO LLC. And then you even have this concept of the Borg, recently popularized by a really popular crypto lawyer. And basically his point is combine lots of legal entities and non-registered entities to achieve whatever the goal is of your project. And that's not that different from what people do in the traditional corporate world. It's just different now and a little more complicated now that you have these unincorporated components, these protocols participating in that overall ecosystem. So next slide, please. I don't even have the DUNA yet on my slide that compares different legal entities around the world. I still need to understand it a little bit better, and actually the presentation today has even helped me do so. But if I were to try to emphasize, I think two key differences between the DUNA and the Marshall Islands DAO LLC. So one is, if you're kind of to Miles's point, if you need a U.S. legal entity, well, then you can't create a Marshall Islands legal entity because the Marshall Islands is not in the United States. And so now you're choosing from what's the best in the United States. And two is that I think the DUNA is for wrapping a protocol where you need people making decisions and you want limited liability for them, and maybe you need one or two other benefits of corporate entities. But the MIDAO DAO LLC is for when you have an organization, right? That's the point of what you're doing, is you need an organization. That organization is going to be governed by everyone. Optionally, you can have a management team. And maybe the final thing is just the nonprofit option. So the nonprofit DAO LLC, much like a Cayman Foundation or Swiss Foundation, is completely not taxed. There's no pass-through taxes. And so you can't use it in a scenario where you want to distribute dividends or do other for-profit activities. But for a nonprofit scenario, it can be a really good fit. So next slide. So find me on Farcaster especially. I know actually several people in the room are on Farcaster, which is this new Web3 social network that's just blowing up. Totally awesome. And if you want, you can download the guide to DAO incorporation by scanning the QR code. Thank you guys so much.